The incident took place in 2001, in a village called Mjani. There was a family in that village who, like many other families in the area, had been traditionally involved in the sari-making industry for generations. One of the members of that family was a man named Rewaz. He had continued the same tradition that had been passed down to him by his father and grandfather. Rewaz had built his home in the area where his in-laws lived. His in-laws' neighborhood was very close to his own family's main residence. Right beside his ancestral home, there was another small building where several traditional handlooms were set up. That was where Rewaz and his workers made saris. Rewaz, just like his father and grandfather, was exceptionally skilled at making high-quality saris. In fact, the saris produced by their family were considered much better than those made by many other weavers in the area. Rewaz worked there regularly, along with several other craftsmen who worked under him. This kind of work had to be done every day. Normally, they would finish their work by around 10 p.m. However, if they received a special order, they sometimes had to work late into the night, taking turns so that the work could continue. There were certain special saris that ordinary craftsmen could not make. Those orders required highly skilled workers, and whenever such orders came in, the workload increased considerably. The workload also became heavier before Eid or any other special occasion. During the winter season, there were usually many weddings and other celebrations, so the demand for saris increased during that period as well. But on this particular night, there wasn't much pressure. It was around 10:30 p.m. All of Rewaz's workers had already finished their work and gone home. Rewaz himself still had a small amount of work left to complete. He intended to finish it and then go home. He was almost done when, suddenly, someone called out from outside, "Rewaz! Rewaz!" Rewaz immediately replied from inside, "Who is it? Who's outside?" A voice answered, "You probably don't know me. I've come to meet you. I want to talk to you about ordering some saris." Rewaz replied, "All right, come inside." The doorway of the room where Rewaz was working was nearly 6 feet high. As the stranger entered, Rewaz noticed something unusual. The man had to lower his head slightly to enter through the doorway. That meant he was taller than 6 feet. He wasn't extremely tall, certainly nowhere near 10 feet, but he appeared to be somewhere around 6 feet 3 inches to 6 feet 6 inches tall. The man was dressed in a white traditional outfit, with something resembling a white lungi. He was also wearing a turban, which had intricate golden threadwork woven into it. He was carrying a bag in one hand. After coming closer to Rewaz, the man said, "I've come to talk to you about an order for saris." Rewaz had never seen the man before. However, unfamiliar customers coming from different parts of the country were not unusual for Rewaz and his family. Some customers would bring their own thread and designs. Others would simply provide instructions and leave the rest to the craftsman. They would also leave the necessary payment, and Rewaz and his workers would make the saris according to those instructions. So, an unknown person arriving at their workshop wasn't anything strange. In fact, people sometimes arrived and called out to them even at 2 or 3 in the morning. Therefore, someone showing up at around 10:30 p.m. was not particularly unusual. The stranger then explained, "My daughter is getting married, and I need 14 saris. I need all 14 of them within just 4 days." When Rewaz heard this, he was actually quite pleased. 14 saris was a very good order. And because these were wedding saris, the payment would also be higher. Of course, the work would be more demanding as well. Rewaz said, "All right, tell me what kind of saris you want. We'll make them for you." The man replied, "You can make the saris, but there are certain rules you must follow." Rewaz looked at him curiously. The man continued, "I will provide all the thread needed for these saris. You must use only this thread to make them, and no one else can work on these saris. You have to make all of them yourself." Rewaz didn't see anything particularly strange about the request. He simply said, "All right, give me the thread." The stranger then took out a piece of paper. Apparently, he didn't have a pen with him, so he looked at Rewaz and said, "Bring me a pen." Rewaz went and brought a pen. The stranger then began writing on the paper himself. He wrote down the required weight of the thread for each sari. The first sari required 1,250 grams. The second required 900 grams. And he continued in the same way, writing down the exact amount for all 14 saris. Then he explained, "I've written down exactly how much each sari should weigh. You have to make them according to these measurements. And I will provide all the thread." After finishing the list, the man reached into the bag he had brought with him. Then he began taking out the thread. The stranger began taking the threads out of his bag. Rewaz watched in amazement. He had never seen thread this beautiful before. When the thread was placed in front of him, he couldn't resist his curiosity. He reached out and touched it. He picked it up and examined it carefully. It was incredibly soft and smooth. Rewaz had never seen thread like this in his entire life. The gentleman had also brought a small balance scale with him. It appeared to be made of copper or perhaps brass. It had a shiny, polished appearance. At first, Rewaz thought it might even be made of gold, although it wasn't quite as dazzling as real gold. The man placed the first bundle of thread on the scale and carefully measured out 1,250 grams. The thread had apparently been prepared beforehand, but he was still measuring each portion carefully before handing it over. And there was something else that caught Rewaz's attention. Every sari required a different color of thread. The man wrote down the details on separate pieces of paper and prepared individual notes for each sari. He explained everything to Rewaz and told him to keep the different threads completely separate so that they would never get mixed together. He also explained exactly which thread was supposed to be used for which sari. In this way, he provided 14 different colors of thread for the 14 saris, carefully weighing each one before handing it over. But there was one condition he repeated again and again. No one else could work on these saris. Rewaz had to make every single one himself. The next morning, after explaining everything, the man left. It was said that in 2001, he had paid $3,000 as an advance payment. He also reminded Rewaz that he would return after exactly 4 days. After the man left, Rewaz didn't do any more work that night. He put all the threads safely to one side, locked up his workshop, and went home. The next morning, when Rewaz returned to the workshop, he began thinking about something. What if my workers see these threads? It was only natural that they might become curious or even tempted. What if someone stole some of the thread? Then I'd be in serious trouble. So Rewaz decided not to show the threads to any of his workers. He would keep them hidden and separate. He also decided that he would let his workers leave as soon as evening came. After that, he would work on the special saris himself. He believed that if he worked hard enough, he might still be able to finish all 14 saris within 4 days. There were no specific design instructions from the customer either. As far as the designs were concerned, Rewaz could use his own judgment and make whatever patterns he thought looked best. The only strict rule was that the special thread provided by the customer could not be mixed with any other thread. But then Rewaz had an idea. He thought, what if I mix a little thread of a similar color with this special thread? And then another thought came to him. If I keep a small amount of this thread aside and use it in another sari, perhaps I could create a unique effect. He could use the mysterious thread in certain parts of another sari, perhaps in a special design or decorative pattern. Because the thread was so unusual and beautiful, even a small amount of it could make another sari look completely different. With that thought in mind, Rewaz removed a small amount of thread from the 1,250-gram bundle. He did the same thing with the other bundles. He took such a tiny amount from each one that it would be almost impossible to notice. Then, while making the saris, he mixed a small amount of ordinary thread into some of the designs. He didn't replace the special thread completely. He only added a little bit of another thread here and there. And if a few grams of thread were missing, there was really no way to notice it without weighing the sari carefully. A difference of just a few grams would be extremely difficult to detect. The stranger had also specified the exact length and width of every sari, and those measurements had been written down on the paper as well. So Rewaz began working. He could not work during the daytime because he had his regular responsibilities. And since the stranger had specifically ordered that no one else could touch the saris, Rewaz had to do everything himself. Normally, when making such a large order, he would need help from his other craftsmen. But this time, even their assistance was forbidden. That was why Rewaz would dismiss all of his workers as soon as evening arrived. Then he would sit down at the loom and begin working alone. Night after night, he continued. He worked until late into the night. Then another day would begin, and he would repeat the same routine. But despite all his effort, the 4 days passed quickly. And when the 4th day arrived, Rewaz still hadn't finished all 14 saris. That night, the stranger returned. He arrived at the workshop and immediately asked, "Give me my saris." Rewaz became extremely nervous. He began pleading with the man. "Actually, I couldn't finish all of them. I had to make every single sari myself. Normally, with an order like this, I would have to take help from my other craftsmen. But you specifically told me that no one else could touch them. I couldn't get their help." He continued, "You also gave me very little time, only 4 days. I simply couldn't finish everything. Please give me 2 more days. I've already completed around 8 saris. If you give me another 2 days, I can finish the rest." The man hesitated. He seemed somewhat uncomfortable with the situation. Finally, he said, "That creates a problem. Then you'll have to postpone your daughter's wedding by 2 days. What are we going to do about that?" After a brief pause, he said, "All right, show me the saris you've finished." Rewaz had kept the completed saris locked away in another place so that no one else could see them. He brought them out and showed them to the stranger. The man carefully examined the saris. Then, to Rewaz's surprise, he smiled and said, "Mashallah, Alhamdulillah, they are very beautiful. I really like them." Then he said, "I'll take the ones you've finished now. I'll come back after a few days to collect the rest." Rewaz replied, "All right, take the ones that are ready. There's no problem." The man took the completed saris and left. Exactly 2 days later, the stranger returned again. It was nighttime. By then, Rewaz had finally completed all the remaining saris. The man collected the rest of the order and took them away. After taking the saris, he paid Rewaz another $7,000 as the final payment for his work. That meant Rewaz had received a total of $10,000 from the entire order. Considering that this happened in 2001, and especially considering how much craftsmen like Rewaz were normally paid at the time, it was an enormous amount of money. Rewaz was extremely happy to receive the payment. The stranger took all 14 saris and left. After everything was over, Rewaz began thinking about the small amounts of thread he had secretly kept aside. "I still have some of that thread left. I should use it somehow. I'll wait and see when I can use it." Eventually, Rewaz made 2 more saris. And in those 2 saris, he used some of the mysterious thread that the stranger had given him. He had used the mysterious thread in a few very specific places on the saris, especially in the parts where the designs were most prominent and immediately caught the eye. After finishing the 2 saris, Rewaz eventually sold them. Another 5 or 7 days passed after that. Then, one night, Rewaz closed his workshop and stepped outside. As I mentioned earlier, his house was located in the area where his in-laws lived. While he was walking toward that side, he suddenly noticed the figure of a woman standing in the distance. There was a faint moonlight that night, just enough to make out her face. But the first thing Rewaz noticed was her hair. Her hair was unbelievably long and thick. It seemed to stretch a considerable distance behind her. The woman's face wasn't exactly terrifying. In fact, there was nothing particularly monstrous about her appearance. She looked fairly normal. Rewaz couldn't tell what color of clothing she was wearing. She appeared to be wearing something resembling a sari, but because of the darkness, he couldn't determine whether it was red, blue, green, or some other color. One thing he was certain about, though, it was not white. The woman then spoke to him in a completely normal voice. It sounded like the voice of an ordinary woman. She said, "Rewaz, you did not do the right thing. You will be responsible for the deaths of many people. Give back what you took." The moment Rewaz heard those words, he realized that something truly terrifying was standing in front of him. He had been carrying a hurricane lantern. He immediately dropped the lantern right there and ran toward his house as fast as he could. He didn't stop until he reached home. Once inside, he told his wife everything that had happened. He explained that he had seen a woman standing outside and that she had said those strange things to him. His wife asked, "What happened? Why would she say something like that?" Rewaz replied, "I honestly don't understand. What did I do? What is she asking me to give back? I don't understand any of it." And there was a reason he couldn't understand what he had supposedly done wrong. When customers provided thread for an order, it was quite common for some thread to be left over. Sometimes the craftsmen themselves would keep a small amount of unused thread. This happened regularly in their line of work. So Rewaz never considered taking a small amount of leftover thread to be some kind of serious crime. He simply couldn't understand why this woman was accusing him of something so terrible. The following day, a well-known local cabbage named Imam Cabbage came to Rewaz's workshop. He had come to place an order for saris for his daughter's wedding. Imam Cabbage told Rewaz, "Please make the sari very carefully and beautifully. I have only one daughter, and I'm getting her married. I've been spending a great deal of money for her wedding, and I want the sari to be perfect." He explained all the necessary details about the sari and then left. Rewaz began making the sari, and once again, he secretly incorporated some of that mysterious thread into the sari. Eventually, the sari was completed. Imam Cabbage came and collected it. He took the sari one day before the wedding. The following day, the wedding took place. But the day after the wedding, around noon, Imam Cabbage came running to Rewaz's workshop in a state of panic. He arrived breathless and immediately said, "Rewaz, tell me something. What kind of thread did you use to make the sari you made for my daughter?" Rewaz was shocked. He couldn't understand why Imam Cabbage was asking him such a question. "Why? What happened?" Imam Cabbage looked at him intensely. "Tell me the truth. My daughter is no longer alive." Then he said, "This happened because of you. Now tell me exactly what you did. Where did you get that thread?" Rewaz replied, "I bought the thread from the market. We always get our thread that way. We have several suppliers, and we regularly buy thread from them." Imam Cabbage interrupted him. "No, there was something different in that thread. There was something in it that caused my daughter to die. Tell me exactly what happened." Rewaz didn't want to tell him about the mysterious customer. He remained silent. Then Imam Cabbage said, "I'll tell you what happened. Try to remember whether you did anything unusual." He continued explaining what had happened after he took the sari home. When his daughter wore the sari on the wedding night, everything seemed normal. But the next morning, inside the newlywed's bedroom, her blood-covered body was found. Beside her was her new husband, crying desperately. When the family members arrived and saw the scene, they naturally suspected the husband of murdering her. The young man repeatedly insisted, "I don't know anything. I didn't do anything. We didn't have any argument. We didn't fight. We went to sleep together, and when I woke up in the morning, I found her like this. I don't know what happened." But nobody believed him. The police were called. The husband was taken into custody. However, Imam Cabbage himself was also a cabbage, and he had several jinn under his command. After handing his daughter's husband over to the police, Imam Cabbage began consulting with his jinn. Something didn't feel right to him. He simply couldn't believe that this young man had murdered his daughter. He knew the boy well. He wasn't the kind of person who would commit such a crime. Imam Cabbage had deliberately chosen him as his daughter's husband because he believed he was a good young man. Not only that, he had even used his jinn to investigate the young man and his family before agreeing to the marriage. He had asked about the boy's character, his family, and his background. Everything he had learned had convinced him that the young man was trustworthy. So he couldn't understand how something like this could have happened. Then another possibility occurred to him. Over the years, Imam Cabbage had treated many people who were believed to be possessed by jinn. He wondered whether some jinn might have attacked and killed his daughter. With that thought in mind, he sat down and began speaking with his jinn. And what they eventually told him was something truly horrifying. The person who had come to Rewaz's workshop to provide the thread was not an ordinary human being. According to the jinn, she was Sahara, the queen of a powerful tribe of jinn. And the strange threads she had provided were not ordinary threads either. They were indeed threads, but there was something else hidden inside them. Some of Sahara's hair had been mixed into the thread. The amount of hair wasn't greater than the actual thread itself, but it wasn't insignificant either. According to what Imam Kabraj learned from his jinn, the amount of Sahara's hair mixed into the thread was roughly close to half of the thread itself. Then, when these saris were made using that thread, the man who had originally come to Rewaz's workshop was named Abbas. Abbas was Sahara's husband. Although Abbas was a powerful jinn, he was actually a very simple, straightforward, and kind-hearted being. He could never have imagined that a human being would deceive him. When Abbas came to collect the saris, he was extremely pleased with them. He examined them, held them in his hands, and admired how beautifully they had been made. He didn't realize that Rewaz had mixed other thread into them. He also failed to notice that the weight of the saris was slightly less than it should have been. So Abbas took the saris away. Sahara was also pleased when she saw them. She didn't notice anything unusual either. But the real problem began when Imam Kabraj's daughter wore the sari. The moment Sahara's hair, which had been mixed into the thread, came into contact with a human body, Sahara immediately sensed something. She realized, how did my hair come into contact with a human body? That was when she understood what had happened. Rewaz had stolen some of her thread, and the worst part was that her hair was mixed into those threads. There was no way to distinguish the hair from the thread. They looked almost identical. The moment Sahara realized what had happened, she immediately came and killed the young woman. But then the question arose, why couldn't Sahara kill Rewaz? The reason was that Rewaz himself had made the sari with his own hands. His physical touch was still connected to that sari. According to what Imam Kabraj learned, if Sahara tried to kill Rewaz directly, both Sahara and her daughter would suffer serious consequences. When Sahara realized that Rewaz had stolen her thread, she became furious with her husband, Abbas. She was especially angry because he had accepted the saris without properly checking them. In her rage, Sahara struck Abbas with a single devastating blow. That one blow killed her own husband. One of the reasons for her anger was simple. When Abbas received the saris, why hadn't he inspected them properly? Why hadn't he weighed them carefully? Sahara had been busy with all the wedding arrangements. Abbas had brought the saris to her, and she had simply looked at them, liked them, and put them away. Neither of them had realized that Rewaz had deceived them. But Abbas had a special responsibility. Because if even a small amount of Sahara's hair fell into the hands of another jinn, or worse, into the hands of a powerful occult practitioner or Kabraj, then everything could be destroyed. According to Imam Kabraj, trapping Sahara would then be a matter of seconds. And once Sahara was captured, her entire tribe could be wiped out. They could also be imprisoned and forced to perform horrifying and terrible things. So, in Sahara's eyes, this was entirely Abbas's fault. And in her rage, she struck him. That single blow killed her husband. Meanwhile, Rewaz couldn't do anything. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew that something terrible had happened, and that was why Sahara had appeared before him in her true form. However, there was another possibility. Before Imam Kabraj had even come to Rewaz and explained everything, Rewaz had already seen Sahara once. So who had that first woman actually been? It was possible that someone from Sahara's own jinn tribe had realized what was happening but had been too afraid to tell Sahara. Sahara was known to be extremely short-tempered and dangerous. So perhaps someone from her own tribe had discovered what Rewaz had done but didn't dare confront her about it. But there was no way to know for certain. Imam Kabraj then told Rewaz, "The fairy who became enraged killed her own husband. And you, what kind of person are you? My daughter died because of your dishonesty." Then he continued, "You probably made 2 more saris using that thread. Who knows who will wear those saris and who will die next? You need to find a solution immediately." Then he asked, "Do you have any of that thread left?" Rewaz hesitated before answering, "Yes, I still have some of it." Imam Kabraj became alarmed. "Then you've created a death trap for many people. You won't necessarily die because of this, but many other people could." Rewaz was devastated. "I've done something terribly wrong. What am I supposed to do now? Is there any way to fix this? Imam Cabbage thought for a moment. There may be one way. We can try. He continued, the next time you see her, don't see anyone else. It will be Sahara herself who comes to you. She will come the moment another woman wears one of those 2 remaining saris. Perhaps those saris haven't been sold yet. Perhaps no one has worn them. But the moment one of those women wears the sari, Sahara will realize it immediately. She will kill that woman too, and then she will come straight back to you. When she comes, tell her this. All right, I'm bringing the thread back. Please forgive me. Other than that, I don't see any other way. Rewaz agreed. All right, I'll do it. But there was one more thing that suddenly occurred to Rewaz. While Imam Cabbage was explaining that Abbas, Sahara's husband, had not been human but a jinn, Rewaz remembered something strange. That night when Abbas had first come to the workshop and sat beside him, Rewaz had noticed his own shadow on the wall. But he hadn't seen Abbas's shadow. At the time, Rewaz had found it strange. However, he had never imagined that it could be something paranormal. Still, he now realized that perhaps that had been the first clue. A few more days passed. Rewaz waited anxiously. He knew that the moment someone wore one of those 2 remaining saris, Sahara would realize what had happened. She would kill that woman and then come straight to him. And, just as Imam Cabbage had predicted, it happened. One night, while Rewaz was returning home, he encountered Sahara again. Her hair was incredibly long and thick, almost impossibly long. But her face wasn't terrifying. She wasn't unusually tall or gigantic either. She looked like an ordinary woman wearing a normal sari. She looked directly at Rewaz and said, Rewaz, what have you done? How could you deceive me like this? Then she continued, I had already lost my faith in humans a long time ago. Even then, I decided to trust you. And because of that trust, my husband is dead. I killed my own husband with my own hands. I have become a widow. I could have killed you long ago. But I can't kill you. Because if I kill you, something terrible will happen to my daughter. And it will also cause great harm to me. And if something happens to the 2 of us, our entire tribe will be thrown into terrible danger. And you don't even know what you've done. When Rewaz heard those words, he began trembling uncontrollably with fear. But after gathering some courage, he said, I am giving your threads back. Please forgive me. Sahara replied, There is no forgiveness for you. Something will happen to you. But I feel sorry for all those women who will wear these saris and die. Because if we don't kill them, we will die. Our entire tribe will suffer a terrible loss. That's why we have no choice. Rewaz immediately went back to his workshop to bring the remaining thread. He quickly returned with the threads and handed them to Sahara. But as soon as Sahara took them, she said, There are 2 more threads caught inside your loom. Go and bring them. Rewaz was shocked. 2 more threads inside the loom? He immediately went back inside and began searching through the loom. And sure enough, after searching carefully, he found 2 pieces of thread caught in one part of the loom. He removed them and returned to Sahara. He handed those threads to her. When Sahara reached out and took them, Rewaz noticed something strange. Her hand looked completely normal, just like an ordinary human hand. There was nothing monstrous or frightening about it. Rewaz then pleaded with her, Please don't kill anyone else. Sahara replied, There is nothing we can do about it. It has to happen. She then made it clear that Rewaz himself was responsible for what had happened. But before disappearing, Sahara told Rewaz one final thing. She said, Rewaz, I curse you. With these 2 hands, you will never be able to make another sari again. In fact, you will never be able to do any work with your hands again. The moment she finished saying those words, Sahara disappeared. Rewaz picked up his hurricane lantern and walked home. When he reached home, he ate his dinner and didn't tell anyone what had happened. The next morning, when he woke up, he discovered something horrifying. He could no longer move either of his hands. Both of his hands had become completely numb and paralyzed. He received medical treatment and consulted different doctors, but nothing helped. His hands never recovered. Eventually, in 2010, Rewaz died naturally. However, many people knew about this incident. Rewaz himself had told the story to many people during his lifetime. His relatives had also shared the story with people in different places. That is why the incident became known to many people. This was the incident. Dear listeners, just think about what happened. Someone trusted a human being and gave him something valuable. But what did the man do? He stole some of it. And because of that theft, the women who wore those saris ended up losing their lives. There was also one important detail that I forgot to mention earlier. Apparently, the remaining saris could not simply be taken from wherever they were kept, whether they were sitting inside a shop or somewhere else. They could only be taken after a woman actually wore them. That was the strange limitation surrounding those saris. Whenever one of the women wore one of them, Sahara would kill her and then take the sari away. Before that, she could not take the sari. That was why Imam Kabir's daughter did not die simply because the sari was sitting somewhere. She had to actually wear it. Only after the woman was killed could the sari be taken away. That was the strange rule surrounding those saris. And this was the story of Rewaz, the mysterious thread, and Sahara, the powerful Jinn Queen.